Now, Central American migrants were part of this increased migration, but also you've seen a lot of migration coming from Mexico. Okay, and so how does the U.S. react to this high levels of illegal immigration coming into the United States? Well, the president at the time, Ronald Reagan, is going to present it as a threat to national security. Okay, so immigrants are invading our country. We have lost control at the border. And so this puts fear into the American society, right? They're scared that, oh, we don't have border control and we have all these people coming in and they're dangerous and they're bringing, criminals into the U.S. and they're taking our jobs. All this fear. To immigration, it's a national security threat, right? So this is the way that Reagan is portraying it. In 1986, you would see the passing of the Immigration Reform and Control Act, and this would put restrictions on hiring unauthorized aliens, right? So employers that were hiring unauthorized aliens, they could get fined, they could even get jail time. Right? And so this is trying to discourage immigration by stopping companies from hiring unauthorized aliens. All right. And so there's penalties for these employers. It's illegal to hire these aliens now. Okay. The IRCA would also increase funding for the Border Patrol. Right, and so you would see more and more individuals getting hired and more funding going to the Border Patrol. But the IRCA would also allow for amnesty for some illegal immigrants, right? And so some immigrants were able to gain amnesty and were able to be naturalized in the United States, right? So between 2 and 3 million people were naturalized because of the IRCA, all right? And so that kind of opened the doors there for a lot more immigrants to actually become, legal residents and citizens of the United States. Because of this increased immigration, you're also going to start to see a reaction against bilingual education programs. The organization called U.S. English, which was led by Linda Chavez at one point, really led the fight against bilingual education. They're trying to eliminate bilingual education programs in states where that is a factor, okay? And eventually, through efforts of organizations like U.S. English, you would see a reduction in federal funding for bilingual education programs, right? These organizations were not successful in completely eliminating bilingual education programs, but they were targeting it. U.S. English and Linda Chavez were also trying to make English the official language of the United States at this time as well, right? They're trying to pass an amendment basically that would make English the official language of the country. All right. And this happened at the state level, right? So some states were passing laws that made English the official language of their particular states, right? It happened even in California. But you still see bilingual education programs continuing even after the passing of English being made the official language of the state. In the 1990s, you're also going to see efforts to increase the border control and enforcement of immigration policies. In San Diego, you would see Operation Gatekeeper take place in 1994. And so this is all dedicated towards securing the San Diego border, which is one of the major crossings for immigrants coming into the United States. And so you would see an increased number of immigrants being detained at the border, right? 1 million immigrants were detained early on, and so it seems to be working as far as stopping immigration. The Border Patrol would get increased funding and more recruits into the Border Patrol, as well as an upgrade in technology. Right, and so they were given night vision scopes. They were given helicopters, ground sensors. All this new technology to help secure the border, right, from this invasion, right, because of this threat of national security, as Reagan put it. Okay, and so what's the effect of Operation Gatekeeper? Yeah, it has the effect of stopping some immigrants from crossing the border, but it doesn't stop immigrants entirely. No, instead, immigrants are going to simply find new routes, and these routes were often more dangerous because they're going through the deserts in the east. Okay, and so now you have immigrants coming through the deserts. People are dying because of dehydration. It's too hot. They're overheating. They're getting heat stroke. Sometimes it's too cold if they're coming in the winter. And so it doesn't stop immigration. It just makes immigration more difficult for people who are crossing over illegally, right? And it leads to an increase in deaths. of migrants who are coming through these more dangerous routes. Another example of increased immigration enforcement is the Illegal Immigration Reform and Individual Responsibility Act of 1996. This act allowed for legal residents to be deported more easy if they committed a crime. Right, because it included more crimes that would qualify them for deportation. Right, so say you're a legal resident and you commit a crime, it's possible that you could be deported. And if you get deported, you could not re-enter into the United States for up to 5 years. Right, and so this is going to increase deportations. And the thing about this is, these immigrants did not get any type of judicial review or official hearing. Right, they didn't go in front of an immigration judge to have that judge hear their case and make a decision on it. No. Instead, they went to Immigration Services, and an officer from the INS basically would make the decision on whether this person should be deported or not. And then if they decided they should be, their deportation would happen immediately. So that's really just expediting the deportation process here. So you see an increase in migration during the 80s and 90s, and then as a reaction, you start to see this increased enforcement on immigration policy. Another reaction to the increased immigration in California was Proposition 187. In the early 90s, California was going through an economic depression. The federal government was cutting its spending, and the state was struggling to balance its budget and pay for programs. And so this led to criticism of social programs and public programs that were supposedly being abused by illegal immigrants. Okay, so individuals basically were saying, oh, these immigrants, they're costing us a lot of money. And this is also coming from the governor of California at the time, Pete Wilson. Okay, Pete Wilson basically is making this argument that, hey, we're not getting a lot of federal funding, and we have a large immigrant population here, illegal immigrants, and they are costing the state money, right? They're costing us millions of dollars for these public programs such as, welfare and other programs. And so Proposition 187 was meant to stop illegal immigrants from having access to public programs, right? And so that's the whole point of it. So basically, Proposition 187 would stop immigrants from receiving health care. Right? They could only receive like emergency health care, but they couldn't receive regular health care if they're an immigrant. They couldn't receive public education, right? No colleges, no high school, all of that would be cut off for immigrants. And social programs like welfare and other public programs that would give funding to individuals who were impoverished, those would also be restricted to immigrants as well. Okay, so all of that would be the result of Proposition 187. And the proposition passed, right? So 187 actually did pass in California at this time. And so immediately you're going to see resistance against Proposition 187. Part of this resistance was a number of court cases at the state and federal level that challenged Proposition 187. Basically, they're saying, hey, this is illegal. This is not constitutional. Right? It's an unconstitutional proposition because it's denying care to certain individuals, and that goes against the 14th Amendment. You're not supposed to be able to deny equal protection under the law for anyone living in the United States. Right? And so ultimately, you'd see a number of protests. Students would walk out of their high schools as well as part of this protest. I definitely remember that as well. And so there were a number of protests against Proposition 187. Ultimately, it was found to be unconstitutional. So Proposition 187, this is a reaction to this increased immigration that is happening at this time, as well as a reaction because of economic downturn, right? So you'll start to see a pattern basically, right? It's a pattern. If the economy is not doing well, immigrants get blamed and they get attacked. And you're going to see policies created that are working to control immigration, right? And Proposition 187 in California is an example of that.